Okay, you're here.
Good morning, everybody. Bruchim habayim, bruchim habaot. Thanks first of all to our sponsor, Rita Geller. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you. Just thank you. Well, thank you again.
You're welcome.
And also, our little friend came along. He wanted to attend the class. Has a comment to make. So, I have to tell you that on Sunday when I was watching the Super Bowl, I thought of Sharon Siegel.
You thought of me?
I did. Why? Because we were talking last week about what happens when a football player fumbles the ball and one player falls on it, the other player grabs it. So very early in the game, the quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles fumbled the ball. The other team's player didn't fall on it. He was smart enough. He grabbed it, ran in for a touchdown, right? So I was thinking that would be the play that Sharon would be watching. So we're going to talk a little bit today about how certain situations in American law are different from the Talmud, the Torah law. So we're going to go back a little bit. We're going to start. If you're in the Hebrew part, it's Yud Amud Aleph 10a, and if you're using the English, so look for 10a2, and it's the top of the column on the right hand side. Eisei Rava LaRav Nachman. And you're going to see right away why I say that the situation as described in the Gemara is a little bit different from the way that we practice law here in the United States, and specifically employment law. So just to ask you a question, suppose, who am I going to pick on today? Suppose I hire Nina to write a certain contract for me, and we have an agreed upon price. And in the middle of the job, Nina says, I don't want to do it. I'm leaving. I'm quitting. Right? Do I have any recourse to Nina based on American law?
Did she sign the contract?
She signed the contract and everything.
We both signed it.
We both signed the contract.
Small claims.
Okay, so Rita says, I do. Shana says, I do too. The Gemara says no. And we're going to see right away. Okay, so here's the question. So Eisei Rava LaRav Nachman. So Rava asked Rav Nachman, we have a principle, he says, Metzias Poel La'atzmo, that if a worker finds an object while he's working for someone else, for his employer, or for the person who contracted him, he gets to keep it. He gets to keep it. The worker gets to keep it, right? So in Nina's case, if she happens to be thinking about this contract that we're writing, and she's walking along the path between Wolverton and Yarmouth, and she's got her mind on the contract, so she's technically working for me, and she sees a dollar bill on the floor, she bends over and picks it up. So Rava says to Rav Nachman, we have the principle that she can keep that. That mitzia, that item, that found item, is her property, right? So he says, Bamed Devar Mamurim, what are we talking about? What is a case that this is describing? Bisman Amolo Balabayis, in a case where the owner, the employer, says to the employee or contractor, whatever, Nacheshi mihayom, ador imihayom. If he says to him, do a specific task for me. So in our case, I hired Nina to write a contract. It could be, if we're talking about, that I hired somebody to change the oil in my car, right? We talked about that last time. Or if I'm a farmer, I'm hiring somebody to pick the oranges, right? So as long as I hire them to do a specific job, if they find an item, Tova,
It's fine.
it's theirs. They get to keep it, right? Okay. Aval, however, Amar lo asei imi malacha hayom. However, if I said to Nina, I want to hire you Wednesday afternoon to do various tasks for me, right? In that case, mitziyaso shabalabayis. In that case, if she's walking along, even though she's a free person, everything else, but I hired her time, and during that time, her services are hired to me. If she finds something at that time, I get to keep it. Right? Okay. So the Gemara says, "Who Amalei?" So Rav Nachman responded back to Rava, Shani Poel, an employee, a worker, is different. Why? The Yadok Yad Balabayisu, because his hand, at the time that Nina is working for me on time, she's not working for me on task, she's working for me on time, her hand is like my hand. So whatever she picks up, she's picking up for me, because she's working for me at that time, okay? So, and here comes the interesting part. But so now, Ha'amar Rav says, wait a second. Poel Yafa Laksar Bo Afilu B'Chatzi Hayom. We have a contract. She's agreed to write this document for me. In the middle of the day, she says, I'm not doing it. I'm leaving. So Rav says, a worker has the right to cancel the contract, even in the middle of the day. In other words, she's supposed to be doing this all day Wednesday, 11 o'clock Wednesday morning, she says, I don't want to do this anymore. She has the right to cancel the contract.
Do you?
So what is the
No, I
contract mean? What's the value of the contract?
Well, the contract binds me,
Right.
and it also agree upon a price, right? So once the job is finished, if she says, you know what, we agreed to do it for 100, I want 150, that's no good, because we did agree.
What if you don't finish the job and you leave early?
Pardon?
What if you don't finish the job and you don't leave early?
So if you don't finish the job, so that's a question. So then it depends upon what was the terms of the deal. So if I hire somebody to change the oil in my car, right? He drains out the oil, doesn't put the filter back, and just leaves. So now there's a whole discussion. What takes place? Can I just deduct the value of what he didn't do, or can I charge him back what it cost me to finish the job? Because if I bring somebody in the middle of the job, they're going to want more. Right? I mean, if I bring somebody in, we hired a painter to paint the room, right? And he did the primer, maybe he patched the holes, and then he said, I'm not working. So now if I go out and hire another painter, he's going to know that I'm in a bad situation. He's not going to charge me just 50% of the job. He's going to charge me more. So there's the question about all that. But the point still is that the worker has the right to abrogate the contract unilaterally in the middle of the operation. Why? So Rav says, even in the middle of the day, because Amarle kol kama be kiara balabayasu. So in that case, the only time that this situation works, where if Nina picked up the dollar bill, is if she did not reject or go back on the contract. As long as that contract remains in force, she has, whatever she picks up belongs to me, right? Because the yad, the hand of the poel of the worker, is like the yad of the balabais, right? So he says, time achrinahu. There's another difference. What's the reason? The ksiv, and they quotes the pasuk, ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim. So Hashem says, to me, oh, we have a lawyer walking in on this right now. Hi, Rob. So, because Hashem says that the Jewish people are servants to me, right? Avadayhem, v'lo avadim la'avadim. Just because you agree to sign a contract to work with somebody, you're not a slave. You are still a free person, and if you want to leave that employment, the employer has no recourse to you. If it's Rita's case, where you agreed to, let's say, paint the base medrash, and you walked out in the middle, and it's going to cost me more now to finish the job because of what you did, that's a different story. Or certainly I'm not obligated to pay you the whole value. But if you're an employee, so let's say I bring in somebody who's a painter, and I say, I need you to work for me for a couple of days, right? And right, that's like that famous case in the movie where with Billy Rose and painting of the chairs. So he was hired by a theater owner to paint all the chairs in the theater. They were wooden chairs; they had to be painted. So he said, "Well, how are we going to arrive on the price?" So he said, "Okay, let's see how long it takes, right? Because the owner of the theater said, I don't want to overpay. Let's see how long it takes, and I'll pay you 350 times that." So Billy Rose took out his paint can, his brush, and he painted it. It took him like 14 minutes. He said, "Okay, I'm going to pay you for that." So after they agreed on the deal, I called the workers in. He said, "Okay, guys, spray him." So, but because so and what? I don't remember the name of the movie, but I remember the scene. So the point is that if you're hired to do the job, it's immaterial how long it takes you or whatever. If you're hired for time, your time at that point belongs to your employer, right? So, and the reason that Nina or any contractor or anyone who's employed by someone else can walk away is because Hashem says, you are my servants, you're not servants to another person. Just because you entered into a contract doesn't mean you're no longer a free person. You still have control over yourself. So Amar Rav Chiya bar Ava, Amar Rav Yochanan. So Rav Chiya bar Ava said in the name of Rav Yochanan, Hamagbiya mitzia lechavero. So now the case is somebody picked up a lost object, or found object basically, for the benefit of his friend. In Tomar Mishnah Seinu, if you're talking about our Mishnah, right? This is Amar Tanoli, and he says to him, give it to me, Amar Velo Amar Zachal. He said, but he didn't say what was the case where so we had the case of the horse and rider, right? So
Get it for me.
pardon?
Get it for me.
He said, pick it up for me or get it for me, but he didn't say take ownership of it for me. Right? There's a difference. So in that case, if you remember, the person on the ground who picked up the object and said it's mine is perfectly within his rights to do that, because the instruction that he was given was just pick it up. But then the instruction wasn't. He was not acting on the assumption that he was acquiring it for the benefit of the other person. He could have been picking it up.
So is there specific words that have to be used that change it from, get it for me to acquire it for me, or hand
So
it to me?
I'm glad you brought that up, because a big part of what I'm trying to accomplish in this group is that to show you that the words that you use are important. The words you use, how you express the opinions that you have, or your intentions, matters. And that's a big part of acquiring what they call a Gemara cup, right? You have an ability to see things the way that the Gemara sees them, and you have to be exact, because if you're not clear in what you meant, then how do we know, right? Because here we are, right? We're sitting here with the judges in a court, and we have to try to decide what is the correct decision that has to come out. And if we don't have guidance about what you said, now we've got to figure it out. So in the case of somebody found an item, or saw a found item and asked someone else to pick it up, the way that he asked him to do it makes a difference.
So what are the words? What does he have to say?
So he says, pick it up and acquire it for me.
Acquire it for me versus give it to me, hand it to me. I
No,
want it.
versus he says, pick it up. He says, pick it
Oh,
up.
just
Or
pick
he
it
says, I see that Mitzvah on the ground, pick it up, whatever.
Look,
So
If
the
he
person,
says, pick it up and give it to me.
pick it up, well, if you give it to me, that's also, you could also
That's
mean that
an
he's,
acquire?
so they could probably say that means about the same thing. But if he doesn't say that, if he doesn't indicate that the action that's about to take place is for
It's
the benefit,
of.
right, then the person's picking up could say, hey, I never intended to pick it up for you, I did it for me.
Myself.
Okay, so now the next Mishnah, so getting to the Philadelphia Eagles and the fumble. So the Mishnah says, Ra'as hamatzia v'nafal aleha. Somebody found the football on the floor, on the ground, and he fell on it. And then what took place? What happened afterwards? Uba acher v'hechzik ba, and somebody on the Kansas City team came and he grabbed it, right? Even though the Philadelphia player fell on it, but Kansas City's player picked it up. Zeh shehechzik ba zachaba. The one that grabbed it, right? The one that the Mendel says snatched it, right? The one that snatched that football, he's the one, and the referee is going to say, or the ball's going that way, right? Because just falling on it doesn't work, and we're going to find out why that is. So the Gemara starts. Amar Reish Lakish Mishum Abba Kohen Bardala. So Reish Lakish said in the name of Abba Kohen Bardala, Arba Amos Shel Adam Konos Lo B'Chol Makom. Wait a second. Wait a minute. Don't we have a principle that the 4 amos, which is translated as an amma is between 18 and 24 inches. So that those 4 amos that surround me have the property that they can acquire something for me. Okay? So just like we were talking about the sailboat race, right? Once we get close enough to the mark, nobody else can come and barge in, because now it's considered as if we've attained that mark and they have to back off, right? So there's no collision. So the same way, the rabbis have set a system that if Myrna sees something on the floor and it's less than 6 feet away from her, Jill can't come and take that, because Myrna's 4 amos have taken ownership of it for her. So Reish Lakish says, what are you talking about? Just he fell on it, but didn't his 4 amos effect an ownership on his part? Right, Miss Jill?
Does it make a difference, whether the object, in this case the ball, is for the purpose of the whole game? And you need to get the ball, that's part of the game.
So why would that matter? In other words, we're trying to decide, so football is kind of
In this case, right, the grabber got it.
right, that person who snatched
Right.
that has it. So, I mean, this is kind of a little bit far-fetched to say in a football game, because it wouldn't happen, but if the Philadelphia player is standing there and he's less than 4 amos away, can't he say to the referee, hey ref, I'm so it doesn't work like that in a football game, but it could work like that in the street, right? If we're walking along the path and Myrna is close to something within 6 feet of it, so Jill can't come and take it, right? Because Myrna says my proximity to that object, and proximity is defined as within 4 amos, has acquired it from me. So Reish Lakish says, well, the person fell on it, wasn't he within 4 amos of it? So didn't that affect the acquisition of it for him?
Did he fall on it on purpose?
He fell on purpose.
Oh,
He
okay.
fell on it on purpose, right? He
Maybe
didn't
he
trip and fall on it.
fell on it, it was further than 4 amos, and he's a tall person, he was able to just fall further.
Maybe,
it's
but
what
when
it
he's on
says.
top of it, he's certainly within 4 amos of it,
And, yeah.
right? That's for sure. So Reish Lakish says, don't we have that principle? So how are you saying this? So the Gemara says, "My tama takinu rabbanan." So why did the rabbis make this rule? After all, they made the rule. They had the right, excuse me, to extend certain rules, and they made this rule that just like in the the rule, boy, just as in the rules of sailboat racing, the people who designed the rules made the rule that if you're within a certain distance from the mark, from the buoy, that no one can barge in, right? They made this rule for the same reason that the rabbis made this rule. Why? The lo asi la ansuya, because people shouldn't get into a conflict. Because once Myrna has established that this is hers, nobody's going to come and try to, by some violent means take it away from her, because she owns it now by virtue of the fact that the rabbis say she has the right to do that, and they made this rule. So therefore, they made the rule. Why? They made this rule to avoid any conflict. But he says, Amar Abaye, so Abaye says, most of Rav Chia bar Yosef. So he says, he's quoting, bringing in another situation. We talked about this before. We talked about Peah. Remember, we talked about what Peah is, the corner of the field that belongs to or that's available for the poor, right? So in the case of Peah, Amar Rava, most of Rav Yaakov bar Idi, in the sequence, he says, Rav Yaakov bar Idi, in another place in the Gemara says, in the name of Abaye, he says, in the case of Peah, Natal mixas Peah v'zorak al hashar. So you have, let's say you have ears of corn with the stalks and everything, they're lying on the ground, and this poor person comes along, he picks up a few of them, and he throws them on top of the others that are there. Okay? So what did he accomplish? So he says, Natal mixas Peah v'zorak al hashar. Somebody took a portion of the Peah, right? He's entitled to take that because he's a poor person. He took part of it and he threw it on the rest. Ein lo ba klum. He accomplished nothing. He has nothing. He did not, by virtue of the fact that he threw this onto the other property, he didn't acquire it. Or another case, nafalo aleha, or he fell on it, right? Poras talis aleha, or he spread his coat onto it. All these cases, Mavir no sohemanu, you take it away from him. Okay, he did not acquire ownership of it. V'chein be'omer shikha, also even if it's not just peah, we're talking about bound sheaves of wheat. In all these cases, doing this kind of action does not affect ownership for you. So
Is he
why
within
not?
4 amos of this pile of corn?
So we're gonna, that's right, we started out this discussion with Ray Schlechter saying, well, just because, just because someone else snatched it, he'd already fallen on it, his Dalet Amos is pretty clear, right? And in the case of the peah where he threw the grain onto it, or he threw his coat onto it, he's also within Dalet Amos, right? So doesn't that work?
But what about if two people are so close, they're within each other's Dalet Amos?
So then you get back to Shnai Mochazin, right? Our first case where you and Miriam were holding on to the sweater, right? So, and again, it's in a way it's the same kind of idea, because what are you going to say? You're going to say I arrived there first. The other person, I arrived there first. So it's in a way it's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, because we weren't there. There were no witnesses to the event. All we have is your word and her word. So again, you both have to swear. The only difference is the means you're using to acquire it. Okay? But the situation is really, Marilyn?
Surefire way of acquiring is to stick it in my pocket.
The surefire way is to pick it up, right? If I see this book on the floor and I pick it up, that's surefire way. Or in the case of the horse and the rider, if I lead that horse by the bridle, or I get onto it, I ride it, make the horse move, that's the same thing. So movable property is acquired through either lifting it up or leading it, dragging it along.
But didn't he lift it up before he threw it on the pile? He lifted it up, he acquired it and gave it away again.
So he lifted, what did he lift up?
In ear of corn.
Right, so did he lift up the other one on the ground?
No.
No, okay, so we know that that's not gonna work. We know that that's out, because he didn't do
lift
that.
it to make it?
What?
He didn't lift didn't he make the initial pile?
He lifted, no, here's our case, he lifted up, let's say it's not corn, let's say something that's quite wide or whatever. So, I don't know, I'm not a farmer, but let's say it's a palm frond or something like that. He wants the palm leaves to make schach for his sukkah, so he takes the palm frond and he throws it on another one. So he did lift up the first one, but he didn't lift up the second one, right? So that means that you look puzzled.
Because doesn't he have to lift each one to put it on the pile?
That's the point. That's the point. In other words, if he lifted each one by one,
Doesn't he have to?
then there's no question. There's no discussion at that point, because he used the standard way to acquire something is to lift it up. And if he did that with each one, we wouldn't be talking about it right now. But he didn't do that. He lifted up one and he put it on top of another one. So now, what's the status of that second one? And even in a way, you could say, what's the status of the first one, because he threw it away. But the point is that
But he put it down with an intention of taking it home.
But does your intention necessarily work? Does it necessarily work? You know, if he threw it down. So let's leave aside for the moment the question of the one he picked up. We're talking about the one that's on the ground now.
That he picked up and put on the ground.
No, the one that was underneath.
He's like reserving the whole thing by putting one on top of the others,
Right.
but he
Right.
can't do that.
So that's the point. So the rabbis are saying that doesn't work.
He
So what
didn't
does he
take
have to do?
possession.
The first one he picked up, right? So let's say it's an ear of corn. He picks up one ear of corn, and then there are 3 ears of corn lying on the ground, and he puts it like across the 3 ears of corn. So he picked up the first one. Yes, he did. Did he pick up the other ones? No.
They're all within his Dalet Amos.
So okay, so what Shana is bringing up is this question of the Dalet Amos.
You're gonna say he changed the terms. Now
So-
I understand.
Pardon?
He changed the terms of the whole thing, right? Is
Did I
that
say
what you were
Shana?
telling me?
Shandel.
Chandel, right. So what he did was he did not use the standard way. If he picked up each ear of corn in turn, then
He's acquired it.
then there's no problem, right? But he didn't do that.
One.
Picked up one to
He
cover.
picked up one.
He picked up one and used it to cover the others. So what's the status of those others?
Unclaimed. Unclaimed.
So then so the Gemara says that doesn't work. So, but wait a second.
If it's Hefker, can he take it?
Sure, he can take it, but he has to take. So if he so
But if
here you go.
someone
You
else
have
comes
two
in,
poor
pick
people
it.
come along. One person takes this ear of corn, he puts it on top of the other ears of corn. Now comes a second person, and he walks over, he picks it up, the one that was covered. Does he have a right to do that? Does the first person
'Cause it's
own
Hefker
it?
now.
No, right? I mean, if he took his jacket off and he hung it on that tree, somebody can't come along and take his jacket. That's his jacket. But if you have a case where he tried to effect ownership by covering it, did that really work? It doesn't really work. So wait, if you tell me that doesn't work, what about the Daladamos? Didn't we say that is supposed to be operable? Okay, so now we're going to find out. So he says. So if you say Arba Amos Shel Adam Konos Lo B'chol Makom, if you say that in all cases the 4 amos of a person effect ownership in his behalf, Niknu Le Arba Amos Didei. So let his proximity, his 4 amos, take ownership of it for him.
He can't do two things.
Okay, so what Mindel's saying that basically, to summarize, he's trying 2 different ways. He's trying first to cover it, and then he also wants to use the Dalet Amos. Okay, so that's really the hint to what the Gemara's answer is going to be, because Hacha b'mayaskina, what are we talking about here? The lo Amar Akni. He didn't say that I want my Dalet Amos to take ownership of it, right? That gets back to the exactness of the language, right? Eat Tikkun Rabbanon Kilo Amar Mayhavi. So wait a second. Does he have to say? I mean, Myrna's sitting here quiet. The dollar bill is on the ground. Does she have to actually say, I intend to take ownership of it? So he says, does he have to say that? Right? Kiva the Nuffle, but now what's the problem? Mindel's answer. He fell on it. So what happened when he fell on it? Gali Daiti, he revealed his intention, right? He wants his falling on it to be the means by which he acquires it.
So he gave up his 4 amos.
Oh, so it's an either or.
So he waived his right to the 4 amos. By his action, he's showing he's not relying on the 4 amos. Because Myrna could take ownership of that dollar bill without falling on it. And don't fall, Myrna, it's not good.
No, don't fall.
Don't fall, right? But the point is that if she fell on it and then Jill snatched it, Jill could take it. Why? Because Myrna waived her right to acquire it by means of her proximity to it. And how do we know she did? She waived her right because she tried to do something else. She tried to use some other means.
One cancels the other.
It's not, it revealed, it showed that she was not depending upon that. She waived her right to that. She wanted to do it a different way. So that's why the Kansas City player can snatch away the ball from the Philadelphia player that fell on it. Because falling on it doesn't help, my friend. You have to hold it in your hands. Okay? So in that case, he's saying that Arba Amos lo nichale. He's not using that 4 amos method in order to take possession of it. Okay? Why? Rav Papa Amar Kitakinu le Rabbanan Arba Amos. So when did they make this rule that the 4 amos actually work for that purpose? He's ba'ama b'sada de balabayas lo takinu le. That's out in the world, but not in my field. I mean, you can't come along, right? I mean, Robin's shaking her head, so I'm going to pick on Robin, right? So you can't walk into my field and there's a dollar bill on the ground there and say I'm taking ownership of it, because my field, by virtue of the fact it's my field, that establishes my ownership. I own that. You can't walk in there and take it. So, but what about the poor person who is going to pick up the payer? How does that work? How do they have the right to do that, right? So, kita kinale rabbanan arba amos ba'alma basada de balabayis lo takinale. They didn't make the rule in a in a piece of land, a field which has an owner. Af agav v'zochale rachmana b'gava, even though the right to acquire something was given over to the poor, in the case of Peah and Shikha, something was forgotten, or Leket, the gleanings, even though that right was given to the poor, right? So, Luchiba, what right really do I have? What right really does a poor person have in my field? What right does he have to enter my field?
Is he working for you?
It's not working for me. He's coming to glean. He's coming to glean. Rita?
In theory, the payout and whatever's left on the field doesn't belong to the owner anymore.
Right.
So that becomes like it's public.
Well, but suppose the kid hits a ball into your backyard, right? They're playing stickball in the street and the ball goes in your backyard, and you're like the grumpy old person that says, "Stay off my grass." So can that kid walk onto your lawn to get his ball?
Yes.
Why? It's your property.
So the ball becomes the owner's property.
It doesn't become the owner's property, it belongs to the kid, but how's he gonna get it?
Throws as a stick. I don't know.
It's the owner to please.
I mean, the point is that ball, yes, it does belong to that little boy, but
You're right, you can't.
but the boy can't get there. So how about the case of Peah, right? So I have a big field, right? And I cut off one corner, I leave a corner over, and now there are people that want to come and glean, and they're outside of my property. They want to come in and take it.
But it's a special right. I mean,
It's a
the
special
person
right.
Has
What-
the right to take some.
That's why you have.
But what if the dollar bill is laying in the corner where the payout is?
You got me. That's a good one. That's a good. Suppose the dollar. Well, so then maybe you could say the dollar bill was. That's a good one. I have to think about that. So, but what Mindel is saying is it's a special right. And what is the word for that special right to cross someone else's property? Robin, you're the lawyer. It's an easement. Exactly right. So when this property was built, when these buildings were built, the water company had a right to put in their water lines, and the owner couldn't stop them because they have an easement. They have the right to enter the property to put the water. But suppose that water company wanted to put a tent up in the middle of the parking lot. Could they do that?
No.
No. That easement is for a specific purpose. So the same thing applies to the poor people and the payer. They have an easement. They have the right to enter into the property. That little kid does not have an easement.
And the dollar bill is not part of the gleaning. It's
The
not-
dollar bill is not really part of the gleaning, right? So I mean, I don't know. I'm not really sure. I mean, it could be you could say that since that corner of the field was left over, the owner maybe does not have the right to take possession of it by virtue of the fact that it's his
It's
field.
the things that were in the corner of the field, not the.
Yeah, or you could say that what is given over to the poor is the grain, not the dollar bill. So I don't know. Rob?
The last thing that you said is what I would argue. If, for example, it turned out that there was a buried treasure in the field, that the owner's father had buried a treasure and the owner didn't know, and now the people are gleaning and the buried treasure is discovered, I would argue that that treasure is not available to those who were gleaning, because they only had rishus to glean the crops, the pay or the shiklo, or whatever else was left for them. There was, HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't grant them the privilege to take anything else that might be on the property.
Exactly right. So that's what it seems to me, and it seems like that's what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara is saying that yes, you do have a right to cross that field. The farmer cannot prevent you from doing it. He can't say, well, the grain is there, but how are you going to get to it? He has no right to say that. He has to allow them to pass over to get to it, but not necessarily, but only for that purpose. Not necessarily to dig up the field and find something buried there. Marilyn?
They have the right to the corners, whatever, if for argument's sake, 10 feet this way, a triangle, okay.
Remember, there's no limit to that. You can make it as big or small as you want. That's one of the things we say every
Who
morning.
has the right?
the farmer sets the dimensions.
Okay, so the person
The size of the farm.
shouldn't have the right to walk across the whole field. Why can't they just walk around the perimeter until they get to each corner?
Maybe they can't, maybe there's no way to get to it, maybe there's somebody else's field bordering it and there's no way to get to that piece. But the point is that they do have that easement.
But an easement, isn't an easement very, maybe I should look this way. Isn't an easement a very specific path? You can't walk through my tulips to get to your,
Well, no, you're not allowed to damage someone else's property. That's a totally different issue. You can't just trample somebody's flower garden
That's the
to
only.
get to it, because then,
do I determine the easement? Do I put a fence on either side of the easement and declare that your easement?
I think that in a case where we're trying to everybody get along with one another, the farmer will be smart to say, this is the path you guys should use. Because it's just logical, it's reasonable that should work that way. And why would anybody object? As long as it makes it available. So, but the point is that the right that they have to enter that field at all is because they have an easement, because they have the right to get to that paya. And there's no other way to get to it other than walking across the rest of the field, right? Okay, so we talked about employment law, we talked about real estate law, right? Okay, let's see what else we can turn up. So he says, let's get back to the fumble, right? He says, Ro'as ha'metziah v'nafal lo aleha, u'bo acher v'hachzik ba. You had the case where somebody found an item on the ground, fell on it, another person came and took it. Zeh shehachzik ba zacha ba. That one, the person who snatched it, acquires it. So but if you say that the 4 amos works, it's effective everywhere, right? What does that mean? So he says, Niknu le arba amos di day. So let his 4 amos, right? The 4 amos that are surrounding Myrna, let that effect ownership. Hachabamayas kinan. He says, what are we talking about? We're talking about a case. Below Amar Akne, he didn't say, I'm going to use that method. V'itikin Rabbanan Kilo Amar, my hobby. So wait a minute. Just because he said, he didn't say anything, does that take her right away? Because he didn't say something? No, he says, Kivda Nafale, Gola Daite de Nefila Nichale de Nikni. He indicated by what his actions were, is that he wanted to use that act of falling on it to take ownership. He wasn't looking to acquire it that way. So now we still have the problem. What does it mean b'chol makom? And you have to know that every time the Gemara says kol, all, it means it's excluding something. And they always ask, when you say all, what are you leaving out? Always, whenever they say all, it always means something else. So he says, Rav Sheshes Amar, Rav Sheshes said, Kita kina rabbanan b'simta. We're talking about the side of the road, which is like a road shoulder. It's a little bit depressed. Not that I'm depressed. I'm not depressed, but the side of the road is a little bit depressed, and people are walking there. It's a place that they used to walk, and at that place, below Dachke Rabim, there are not a lot of people that are walking there. In the middle of the street, where a lot of people are going back and forth all the time, they didn't make this rule. They made the rule only in a place where people have the right to walk there, but not that many people go there. So it's more or less a private space, not privately owned. It belongs to the public, but it's one that's used not as heavily as the middle of the road, right? So the middle of the road, this rule would not apply. It applies only in what they call a simta, which is this lower area on the side of the road. So v'haba kol makam kamar, but it said all, right? He says kol makam la suye tzidei rishus habarham. So if you say all, it means not every single thing, but he did say all. So what are you including? Because you're excluding the middle of the road, but you're including something too, aren't you? What is that? He says that is let's say the right-hand lane, where the traffic moves more slowly. So you're still in the road, you're not in the shoulder, but you're in the slow lane. So that's included too. In the places that your proximity will make a kinyan, acquisition for you. Okay? So, Rama Reish Lakish, Mishum Abba Kohen Bardala. So now we get into another question. If a couple get divorced, so the way that it works is that the husband hands the bill of divorce to his wife, right? It's not as simple or in a way as brutal as it sounds, that the husband can just divorce his wife for any reason and just hand her the divorce. It doesn't exactly work that way. It's a little more complicated than that. But literally, the husband has to hand his wife the bill of divorce. Okay, so now suppose the person in question, the wife in question, is underage. Okay, so now he has to hand her the document, and she can take ownership of it not only by physically holding on to it, but her property. So if she owns a piece of ground, or her house has a courtyard in front of it, and the husband goes and he throws that divorce document into her courtyard has acquired it for her. But it doesn't apply.
She doesn't have to accept it?
What?
He can throw it in and she doesn't have to accept it?
So that's where we get into the whole area of divorce, and it's pretty complicated. But the point is that theoretically or legally, she becomes the owner of it by the virtue of the fact that her property now acts as her yad, her hand. So just as she has a hand to acquire, her property has that power.
But anywhere she is, she has her Dalet Amos, right? It doesn't have to be.
Sure.
So it doesn't have to be she owns the piece of property. She could be standing in front of the
Right.
library.
Right, that's right. But in the case of a minor girl, does she have a yad, a hand, in the same way as an adult has, and therefore can her property act as a yad for her benefit? So the answer is no, she doesn't have that. That's just simply a legal construction. That's something that she does not have. So how does that work? So he says, Amar yesh la chatzer yesh la arba amos. So Reish Lakish says she does not have that ability to acquire it because she does not have a yad, therefore she does not have the arba dalet amos. Rabbi Yanai says she does. So b'maikar miflagi, what is their difference of opinion? If you boil it down, what are they arguing about? So he says, Mar Savar, right? Yeah, Mar Savar Chazar Mishum Yoda is Rabbi. So one says what is the operation? How does the courtyard, effect ownership? What is it actually acting as? In other words, is it acting as her hand, right? Or he says, Savar Chazar Mishum Shlichus is Rabbi. Maybe the property acts as her agent. So is it acting as her hand, or is it acting as her agent?
Or his agent.
His agent's another
He's
story.
putting it in on her
And
property.
we're gonna have to leave it right there because we're out of time. And remember, next week we're having lunch together.
Oh.
So I guess we'll put it out at the beginning of the